Now, since this Orientalism is quite a voluminous book, we can't go in detail in this lecture about the book, but still we'll give you a layout of this book, which will help you in understanding the basic concepts which EdwardSaid talks in this particular book, and that particular analysis of the book or the summary of the book will help in great deal in understanding the post-colonial theory, because this book is considered as a stepping stone, as the major breakthrough in the post-colonial theory. In this book, Orientalism, EdwardSaid would be talking about East and about the West, about the binary division of the East and West. Now let's first take up that how does EdwardSaid define the Orient or define the Occident? How did he understand this division of the world, East and West? So we would be dealing with some basic subheadings and understanding Orientalism. One of the important aspect about which EdwardSaid talks in the book Orientalism, which was developed by West about East, is that he says that West created binary opposition. It created binary division in the world. Now, this binary opposition and binary division was very important to give a good meaning to the West. Now, if West considered itself as developed, as civilized, as glorious, as full of resources, as full of opportunities, as humane, now that could only be understood in a binary opposition, in contradiction to a world which lacks all these facilities. So what West did, it created binary division, and that binary division which was created by the West was unequal. You know, if West stood here, East would stand here. Now, since there was a huge gap, a huge difference between West and East, it gave a natural and inherent right to the West to rule the East. Because it was in this division that they would say that East is underdeveloped, it is uncivilized, it is no way human. The human beings which reside the East are not completely human beings. They would be much like William Shakespeare's character from The Tempest, Caliban, who are half fish or half men, or they would be the characters from the essay, from the novel by Joseph Conrad, The Heart of the Darkness, that they would be cannibals, that those who have got no feelings and emotions for the other human beings. So if the need comes, if the moment comes, they would eat their fellow men. So that was the kind of people that West created or thought of about the East. So one of the important aspect about which EdwardSaid talks in his book Orientalism is this binary division which was created by the West during colonial times and continued it in the post-colonial times in order to maintain and establish its monopoly and its power, so that the ruling aspect of the West over East never comes to an end. The other aspect about which EdwardSaid talks about, well, two things that I would explain here before I take up the other point is the Orient and the Occident. These are the two divisions about which EdwardSaid talks. Orient means East, are the people of the East, and Occident means West, are the other division about which EdwardSaid implies is the self and the other. Self are the East, rather self is the West and other is the East. And there are many phrases which have been used about them. For example, other or Orient or East is considered as the white man's burden because he is uncivilized, because he is unethical, because he is underdeveloped, he is underground, he is a semi-human. so he is the white man's burden, and it's the duty of the white man to better him, to make him a human being, to make him civilized, to make him advanced, to make him educated. Now, how can we understand that West is better than East? It is only possible if there is a division, if there is a binary division, and that is what EdwardSaid talks at the very onset in his book Orientalism. The other aspect about which he talks in his book, he says that Orient is Western fantasy. Now, when this binary division was created by the West about the East, it was not all based on the facts. It was highly based on Orient's fantasy. They thought that the people in the East are the cannibals. They thought that the people in the East would be like Calibans. Now, creating a character like Caliban is not real. Nobody would agree with the fact that people in the East were like the Caliban, who were like half fish and half men. Nobody would agree that all the people in the East, in Africa, in Caribbean, in India, in Asia, were man-eaters, were cannibals. But East had to create that fantasy, had to create those fantastic stories which would help them to establish themselves as absolutely pure and East absolutely rubbish. And EdwardSaid says that Orient are not, the views of the Orient are not what may actually exist in Oriental lands, but result from the Western dreams, fantasies and assumptions about what this apparently radically different, contrasting places contains. Now, the important thing is that East is not different, it is radically different. It is peculiar. The habits of the Eastern people are bizarre. They would think for a while that, see, if the Eastern are not as beautiful, as handsome, as white as we, that is first thing. They would be brown, they would be black, they would be anything that white is not. Now, it's not sufficient. Being brown, being black is not bad. But he is black and say, for example, he doesn't take bath. Now, that makes him more bizarre. That makes him more peculiar. That is what West thought about East. And all this database that was created in the West about East was mostly based upon the fantastic imagination of the West about the East, and it had very little to do with the ground realities in the Eastern states. And another aspect that went with it was that the landscape of the East was beautiful. They would not derogate the landscape. They would not make the landscape in the East something which is very bad. They would appreciate, for example, the natural beauty of the Eastern landscape, but they would never appreciate or praise the people inhabiting this landscape. So that helps them in their political agenda or propaganda, that the people from the West would come and they would inhabit the East, since the landscape of the East is good, but it is being inhabited by bad people. So what this Orient created, it created a fantastic binary division, a binary division based on the fantasy rather than the facts. So that was another aspect about which EdwardSaid discusses in detail in his book